Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Now, just to set a bit of context, some of you might have been here last year, some of you were, but I think the topic of African art as an asset class is one of growing significant interest. Those of you in the room who might be art collectors or who are around in Lagos during Art Week when Art X takes place, see that Lagos has now got the pulling power to bring artists, collectors, and the prices that African art, Nigerian art is commanding both here in Nigeria and globally has significantly increased. So we're not quite there yet, and we're going to explore the whys and the hows and perhaps best practices around the whole art scene. And so one of the issues this is why the topic talks about the preservation and talks about the collecting and the custodianship of it, the ownership or whoever is holding it, but very importantly, how it can be transferred to the next generation, or whether it should be transferred, if not, why not. So that's the context of the panel we're on today. I think those who know me know that apart from my work as a lawyer and wealth manager, I think the other half of my life is spent passionately in the art collection and art creation space, which is why I think I can be worthy of meeting people like Mr. Castellote, who is a global expert. So thank you everyone for being here. So I'm going to kick off with a question to Niyi. And Niyi, why is African art increasingly being viewed not just as culture, but also as an asset class? And how has this affected the liquidity of the modern African art market?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I think first and foremost, in my opinion, I think art is always a cultural asset before it's an asset class that is investable in. You can't put monetary value on our culture, on our history, and our representation. So I think that's incredibly important. However, I also do know that if you pay significant money for art, then it is like in your asset class as a valuable piece of asset. I think historically, art has proven as a hedge against inflation. About 10, 12, 15 years ago, the masters, N1 Grillos, sold for about 10, 12, 15,000 pounds, I believe. Today, easily they're selling for 200,000, 500,000, and £1 million. So it's an asset class that has returned great returns over the years, which has also created an illiquidity in the market. Most collectors, when they buy, unless they have to sell, which is maybe they have financial issues or they're restructuring their portfolios, do not sell. And most artists have a very limited number of works that they do in their lifetime. If you take a Yusuf Grillo, Uche Okeke, or Demas Nwoko, for instance, I think they have less than 1,000 works collectively. And if it's all bought up, it's very likely that those works would not come to the market for a very long time. So it makes it harder for you to find those works. And with limited supply means greater demand, and of course, the value starts to go up as well. So it's a good problem, but it's also like a problem, so to speak.
Thanks, Niyi. I think in the same vein, I mean, of course, yes, we're talking about, N1 Woos and Yusuf Grillos and Uche Okekes and, art of living and dead artists of great value, in demand. Auction houses in the UK, Bonham, Sotheby's in New York, all have specialist sales for African art. But I think one thing that we shouldn't forget is the art is of value when provenance, when you can prove, first of all, that it's actually been painted by the artist that it looks as if it's been painted by, and that it's an original and not a fake. And so Ugoma is, I would say, a very experienced art advisor and someone who helps collectors navigate the whole sort of collecting landscape. So Ugoma, tell us how important is the provenance in the valuation and transfer of African art? And what risks arise when provenance is unclear?
Thank you, Bimpe, for the question. Like with everything, we need to be, I guess, sure of our assets. If you buy a TV, you have a receipt, you have a warranty. If you buy a pair of shoes, you have a receipt, you have a warranty. In the case of our nascent art space, provenance becomes extremely important because it's, apart from your invoice, which I will speak about, it's essentially it's a proof of a connection. It's a proof of originality and authenticity, which is important. Of course, where you have, now that art is popular, as Niyi said, you also have moral hazards, so we have lots of fakes. So how do you determine if your work is original versus a fake? So it's important. Provenance is very important, especially because the marketplace is very vast. It's full of people like me who are independent private dealers, but it's also full of things like auction houses, which are highly regulated and also are not in the business of losing money, so they don't want to sell dud items. So provenance becomes extremely important. In the case of Nigeria, where I like to say we are pretty much regulating ourselves. The art industry globally is quite unregulated. And if the global art industry is unregulated, in Nigeria, it's extremely unregulated. And so one of the things I try to do and to preach is the idea of self-regulation. So you almost stand as an endorser, as a gallerist, as an advisor, even as a collector. You have to go the extra mile because we care about this. We care about the cultural heft of the art that we're collecting and selling. But we also care about the idea that because this thing is so important to us now, and we've invested this amount of money and time and love in it, we want to see a future. So we all are involved in this idea of proof and validation and provenance. And we all do that. I declare things as original. And when you think about the context of Africa and Nigeria in particular, I think we all understand that our names are very, very valuable, probably even more valuable than money. And so by the time I append my name to something and say it is true that I declare that this item that I received from Mr. Niyi Adenubi is indeed an original, if I'm privileged and the artist is still alive, I can verify with the artist. If the artist is dead, I can verify with the family or the trust. And there are ways around it. It's not quite formal, it's not quite regulated, but there are ways around it. But what it is that we're dedicated to ensuring that there's confidence in this asset, which of course first has cultural value, maybe financial value, and what lets it be something that's long-lasting is this idea of authenticity and endorsement.
Thank you, Ugoma. I think so the message is, if you're either starting to collect or have been collecting and it depends on where you bought it from. And even when you bought it from a gallery, then you need to make sure they give you some sort of certification, which means that they themselves are basically, making a commitment to you that they've sold you an original piece. So that's really important. Now, I have to say that on the African continent, I think Nigerians, anywhere in the world, they will tell you that Nigerians are the second sort of largest group of art collectors. I think South Africans are probably the first group, but Nigerians are prolific collectors and have amassed over decades, not just today. I mean, a lot of the art that we're seeing today was created 40, 50 years ago. And turning to Jess, I know the Shyllon Museum, maybe please give us a bit of a background of what the Shyllon Museum is, how it came about, and what are the unique challenges that you see that we face as collectors or as museums even in caring, preserving African art compared to other assets.
Thank you. Perhaps I should start with a small story of a time when I wanted to know a little bit more about the Nigerian art scene. And this was some 15 or 18 years ago. And I decided to put together a little bit of research on collectors. The outcome of that was a book still available on Nigerian contemporary art in Lagos private collections. So I visited all the people I knew and people I had never met before. I visited over 40 collectors in Lagos, and they were very generous. They opened the doors of their offices, their sitting rooms, their bedrooms, their toilets, their stores, and I was generally appalled by what I saw. Artworks inside a bathtub, artworks piled one on top of the other, piercing, artworks in a room that was infected with all type of animals, insects, rodents, everything. So I thought, here there is a problem. And really there is a problem. Because for other assets, they are easier to, there are less challenges. With artworks, there are many challenges. And in Nigeria, perhaps more than in other places. There are environmental challenges, the weather, the lack of power, because you need to maintain the humidity, and there are structural or infrastructural problems. If now you have an artwork that has been damaged and you want to locate a reliable conservator, you are in trouble, because we have few reliable conservators. If you want to check whether that Benin bronze that you got is really from the 15th century, you don't have a lab that can tell you that it is or it is not. So there are many challenges, infrastructural issues, legal issues. Ugoma has mentioned provenance. This is a huge problem, a huge challenge to have proper provenance. So there are many challenges there. It's not easy. Art also is not very liquid. The art world, you know very well how it's very opaque everywhere. And I agree with Ugoma that perhaps here is even more on a structure and more opaque. You don't know. We don't have documentation, or we have little documentation. For instance, if you want to have data on the value of similar works to the one you have or the one you want to buy, where do you go? There are no reliable sources of information. So there are many challenges. But on the other hand, I think there is a great opportunity for collectors or primarily or persons that focus primarily on the aesthetic or artistic value, but there are also opportunities for people who see beyond that, or along with that, the investment value. The African contemporary art market is still very small. If the global art market is around, I think last year it was $65 billion. The last piece of information that I got on the value of the African artwork last year was 61 million. That means we are 1,000th of the global art market. So we are small. But on the other hand, we are growing faster, and there is much more interest than in other places. Perhaps later on, if you want, I can tell you a little bit about the Yemisi Shyllon, but yes. Well, this is a very good example of somebody, somebody who thought about what he wanted to do with his collection. Prince Shyllon is probably the collector with the largest collection in Africa. Probably he has, or he says, he has over 6,000 works. Now, and he has some of them of real value, some of them less. But now we have been friends for many, many years, and long time ago, one day talking, saying, what do you want to do with your collection? I asked him, how do you see your collection when you are not here? Do you see dismembered, sold, your children are happy to have this, and how do you see it? And he told me that he wanted his collection to have a public vocation. He saw himself, and he says that as a guardian, as somebody who is taking care of something that truly does not belong to him, that belongs to all of us, and he wanted to make it public. And that was the beginning of a long conversation that ended up in him donating 1,000 works from his collection and money for the building of the current Yemisi Shyllon Museum at Pan Atlantic University.
Thank you, Jess. I think it's important to also just point out that whilst the art market, even if it's worth 600 million, I think one issue that we don't have, and I think I'd like to welcome comments from the panelists about the fact that, first of all, what role do you think art is playing other than things of beauty hanging on our walls? And I have my own sort of, I would say, quick opinion about art in diplomacy, art as something that actually helps to push a different and positive narrative about the continent, about us as people who actually have not just skills to make masks, but people who are continuously evolving in intellect and in thought leadership, even in the art space. So what role does art play, everyone? And secondly, how do you see the future, especially where we don't have major institutions like, in the UK, you'd go to the Tate Museum. In France, you go to the Pompidou. In New York, you'd go to the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, and on and on and on. How do you see this whole art ecosystem? What are the risks and challenges without institutions? But first, maybe a word on what do you feel that art also does, apart from being things, aesthetic beauty?
I think that's a very brilliant question. I think beyond art, I think the creative industry generally has been exceptional in the last 10 years, so to speak, in Nigeria. We've seen Nollywood, we've seen our music, we've seen our fashion, we've seen our food be global ambassadors for our country and our continent. And I think that's fantastic. But 20 years ago, if you mentioned that you were from Nigeria, you were looked at as the prism of credit card fraud or 419 or stuff like that. Now people refer to our music, they refer to our culture and all of those things. And social media also helps to amplify that. So I think that's fantastic. It's a great thing. Visual arts has, of course, blown up since then. I think there are a lot of infrastructural issues, and I love that Jess talked about that. But for me, I see those gaps as an opportunity to build our art ecosystem in Nigeria. Bimpe mentioned Tate in London, Pompidou in Paris. This initiative that Jess spoke about, Yemisi Shyllon Museum, is one. We both are on the board of GAS Foundation, which is an initiative by Nkontchou is another.
With three.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. We also have Ugoma as our trustee.
Yeah, we're three trustees. We're three trustees.
Yes. So the infrastructure has been built, and now we have the opportunity to write our name in the sand, as they say, to create a legacy. In the Western world, most of this was done 200, 300 years ago when they were industrializing and they were making so much money and their GDP was building. Nigeria is in that space today. Ghana is in that space today. So for me, more than just the artwork having value is that how are we promoting our culture? How are we leaving a legacy for our family? We talked about foundations earlier, trusts, all those setups. Those things are also very instrumental in terms of how we build our collection, but more importantly, leave a cultural legacy for the next generation. And I'm so excited that I'm living in a generation where I can participate in actually making a difference in building that infrastructure.
Yeah, we definitely have to build. I was thinking about two things. We have to get organized, and we have to build. Niyi has mentioned music. I guess with music, there's coding. With tech, it's easy. It's a track. You can find it. You can channel it. With film, it's the same. With art, it's very difficult because, first of all, the entry point is high, but the entry point, even though it's high financially, the results and I guess, externalities of art are so much more, I would argue, biased than even film or music. So we have to get organized. Where we don't have the legal infrastructure or policy infrastructure, what we have is a community. And it's interesting that, you know, the things happening on this panel, where three of us sit on as trustees on a board. I'm sure that both of you are going to be participating at something at Yemisi Shyllon Museum this year. Jess, Castellote, and I have quarterly meetings. You know, we are always in touch, and essentially what that is doing is we're forming a soft. I would say we're forming our own soft infrastructure. We're forming our own soft policies, and it's still really edged in, I would say, I like to call it Africanism, because it's really about this village. Is that Jess will struggle to, you know, build more museums if he breaks certain social, ethical, financial codes. Mrs. Nkontchou would not be able to gather us here if, apart from her own sort of professional prowess, there was not personal equity. You know, this is really very personal. So wealth is personal, art is personal. Children, as we've discussed over the last day, you know, taking over and succeeding parents, these are personal things, and we have to talk about them, we have to repeat them, we have to discuss, we have to organize. And so we have to get organized. The other thing is that we have to, of course, build. And we don't sit down. The lady who spoke on the panel yesterday said that evangelizing is twofold. You can either go and knock on doors, or you fund the people who knock on the doors. So being passive is not an option. And there's so many ways. All we're doing at the end of the day is, yes, to celebrate and elevate this wonderful, I call it most useless, useful asset class, because art is the only thing that you can hold value in. It doesn't talk to you, it doesn't do anything for you, but gives you this world of benefits. It gives you cultural, spiritual, financial, identity. It gives you even bragging rights, if we want to go to a Ninja sense. You know, an artwork can get you a deal. A conversation around a painting can bridge the gap between you and that funder. Same way golf does. Many people I know, some friends, have taken up golf because they want to be close to the decision maker. I argued earlier with Jess that I don't really mind, as a person who's building in this space, why you come to art. Just come. And then the second level is that there are tools in place that people are taking up personally. We're forming institutions, we're building those institutions to make sure that this thing is something that you believe, because I know there's still so many naysayers in the room. I think we're a larger crowd than we were last year, but I think that we've improved, and that's because I think people are taking an interest. But of course, no one is in the game of losing money, so you need to be sure that, yes, it's not just about Ugoma and her love and Bimpe about her obsession, is that this thing that we do love and are obsessed about is real. I will tell you two stories. I'm in the process right now of writing a provenance letter, because there's something that I sold privately, discreetly, to a PEP, by the way. And, you know, I've found my own personal way to verify how I do business with a politically exposed person, because I also realized that the option for me to turn that PEP away is that money doesn't flow into a system. But when that money flows into a system, it doesn't just enable me, it enables about 20 people. It enables the drivers of the art, the framers of the art, the hangers of the art, the insurers of the art. It enables the spaces where this art lives, where you might go to, and our Iwosan friends will say that, yes, maybe your hypertension levels dropped just a little bit. So that's another value of art, right? It's also therapy. And it's proven. You can ask ChatGPT. So we have to get organized. We don't wait for anybody to organize us. We're organizing ourselves, and we have to build institutions or support those who are building the institutions that will make this thing less an emotive idea, but something that is not just emotional, but actually a real store and a platform for the things that matter to us, which is making sure our wealth doesn't go away.
So, Ugoma, thank you. And I think just so that I think people get in the context of why this panel keeps showing up. Art is a store of wealth. Niyi has just given you some figures about, and Ugoma did a talk last year, charting the exponential growth in the value of African art. So, I dabble, and I have pieces I've been collecting for 30 years. I have pieces I bought before I moved from Nigeria for a few thousand naira that suddenly that artist over time and hard work has been discovered to be, an artist of significance, and suddenly those works are of immense value. It doesn't mean I'm going to sell them, but it probably means that at least I feel I have some store of wealth on my walls that perhaps one day I could actually, liquidate to actually release money. And what I keep finding, because I obviously work with a lot of Nigerian families, that like Jess said, I often go, when I come to Lagos, to have a meeting with a patriarch, matriarch, and in the sitting room, and I'm looking over their head while they're talking to me about, yes, I'd like to have a portfolio of X, Y, Z, but it's, the dividends income didn't come so well this year, etc. And I'm thinking, sir, just above your head there, that artist, that particular artist passed away in 1981, and his last auction price at Sotheby's was 150,000, and that one that sold was much smaller than this. I'm like, really? And it's been sitting there, dusty, and this is a real story, on the wall, and many Nigerian families don't appreciate that actually in their living rooms, in their storerooms, in the boys' quarter, honestly, dad or grandpa collected art because he was friends with the artist who, when he needed money in those days, there was no gallery, there was no museum, he would say, my friend, I need 10,000 naira, and he would part with a piece of work. El Anatsui, just to give you an example, okay, he's an artist that's Ghanaian, although he lived and taught in Zaria for many, many years. Honestly, I know so many families who have works of El, and they're mostly wood carvings. El Anatsui's works now, even the smallest works now, go for a minimum of $500,000. And the biggest ones go for like $3 million. And he's still alive. He's 95. And so the point is, if you have art in your surrounding, respect it, and as a custodian of it, treat it well. You need to make sure it's well, in a good condition for you to keep that value, and perhaps get it, valued by an expert. So art is an artist class. It is becoming of significant value. It is returning thousands of percents of returns if you pick the right one. But also, I think one has to be careful about speculating and just buying because the thing is African art and so it's going to increase in value. It's quite a, I would say, nascent area, and is a very specialist area. And I think Jess might want to say a few words about that.
Yes, and perhaps a small word of warning. Ugoma and Niyi have heard me say this several times, but I will repeat it. Normally we talk of value, and I always challenge when somebody says the value of art. Say, why don't you think of the values of art? Why do you reduce art to monetary value? What about the aesthetic value? That is a value, to have something that is beautiful, that is wonderful, that it moves you, that it touches you, that it makes you happy. That's not monetary value, but it's a value. What about meaning? What about a word that when I enter here, I look at this gentleman. There is no lady. They are all gentlemen. And I have known personally at least the last 15. And these are not photographs, these are paintings. And the fact of seeing some of them who have passed already and seeing them there this has a historical value. It's not how much is that work, for how much can I get from that work. No, it's somebody that perhaps you knew, and this has a historical value. But there are works that have an emotional value. Perhaps they are not great artworks. Perhaps they are worth little money. Perhaps they are not of historical significance. But it was the artwork that my grandmother gave me before she died. And it means something, and it has a value for me and for other people. So I would like to encourage or to bring this, that to be careful, not to reduce the value of an artwork to the monetary value of that artwork. Though, I said, in this context, we are talking about this as an asset, and it's obviously.
No,
but
you're absolutely
it's important.
correct, Jess, because actually, Niyi made the point that when you get bitten by the bug, and yes, the therapeutic value of owning art actually far exceeds that monetary value to a collector, to the extent that there is usually problems of liquidity, because collectors, I've never sold a piece of art that I own, and I think that's something that most collectors will tell you, that they having it, like you said, all of these things, the emotional connection, the historical value, just even the responsibility as a custodian of something that is of immense cultural value, especially for someone like me who is diaspora, who lives abroad and who feels that having it on my walls, and people who come into my home who are not African, I think they see it, and it actually is a conversation. It's a different conversation to be had. That's different from oh yes, I got one of those emails the other day, that I used to get. So yes, Jess, that's absolutely right. And I think Niyi wanted to add.
I wanted to add something about value, because it keeps coming up when you're speaking. Of course, we want to scale. So this idea of scale, and I was having a conversation with a mentor of mine who was just talking about how important this idea of how to value something is. And I believe that, just as Jess said, valuing a piece will be very fragmented. There'll be a quota for all these things: historical, aesthetic, spiritual, national identity. But then I also often say to people that you're looking for value in the wrong place. And this actually brings it home to this conference and the idea of, family wealth and wealth that goes on, is that sometimes we don't even realize that we give things value. An example, I have a Gerald Chukwuma, which I got in 2009. It's a personal story. It's the first art piece I ever bought. So it's the first thing I've ever bought. And it was recently valued. And it's valued probably not in the same range as a Gerald Chukwuma of its same caliber. But why? Because it's the Gerald Chukwuma that Ugoma, Ebilah had. In terms of these families and companies, which is, I guess, really the frontier now, where companies are collecting art, it is very possible that even a market-based value of an art piece is still not the value of the art piece, because the collector and the holder gives that even extra delta. That's why we have auctions of memorabilia that popular, important, iconic people had. So it's just to encourage us, as far as we're seeking this value and we're waiting to enter the art world or to consider art as an asset class because we can't quite figure out what its value is that maybe a part of that value is actually in you. If you're an iconic business, an iconic family, a generational company, a celebrity, is that you have a role to also even help this unregulated, nascent space index. Because that's all we're trying to do, right? Just give index and meaning to this, our cultural soft outlet, which we're all still figuring out, by the way. Yeah. But if we just even look at our, our friends in the UK and, the examples we're following is that there's a delta that really you give. So rather than looking for what's valuable is that you decide that you will be the best industrialist, you'll be the best philanthropist, you will write about it, you will educate, you'll be educated, you'll be knowledgeable, and those things still give your assets the value that you're actually looking for. And it's sort of like a circle.
Thanks, Ugoma. So in that context, and time is up with one piece of the puzzle that we do want to tackle very quickly, is the transfer of African artworks, because, like I said, more and more of us are collecting. There are older collectors and younger collectors, and to be honest, the date when we go on to the next place up there is not known, so you could be young, you could be old. But the point is, when you've accumulated a few pieces, a lot of pieces of art, especially recognizing that, they are of value, not just monetary value, even cultural, historical value in the context of the artist and the body of work. What are you doing about thinking of what to do with that art when you're no longer with us? Are you going to just say, well, my children can take care of it, and maybe they're not interested, and they're going to sell it for a pittance, or not sell it, or leave it, to rot? And that's part of the issue here, is we are collecting, and do we have a strategy? And maybe, Jess, I'd like you to advise us on what that strategy should be when we start to amass a lot of art.
I think on this, like in many other issues, you have to start with the why. Why do you collect? If you are collecting as an investment, you think you are the ones who know what is the best way to get more. If you are not collecting as an investment, but you are collecting as a collector, then the why is different. And then what is going to happen, or what you want to happen with that work or that set of works is different. If I see myself as a custodian of a heritage, then I will want my works to be public. So I will look for vehicles that allow me to transfer to everybody when I die or so I will set up a museum, as many people all over the world. There are museums with the name of somebody who put it. This is a very common thing, because that person wanted those works to be for everybody, not for himself or herself and the family. Now, perhaps you want to do a mixture, a little bit of everything. So you may say, okay, I set up a foundation that is going to promote the arts, but at the same time, or there are plenty of vehicles and mechanisms. But the first thing is to know, what do I want to do with my works? Do I see them as something that is an asset for me and my family? Or I see it as something that ultimately is for everybody? That's the first question. Yeah,
like a legacy, basically. So maybe quickly, and the time is up, and we want to have Q&A. Niyi, what's your take on that next-gen strategy?
Thank you. I think I'll add to what Jess has said about the why. So I started collecting because I was stressed from my day job, and I needed a distraction. And so for me, I was already historical with Nigerian and African arts, so it was a natural thing for me to do, to collect Nigerian art and African arts. But then, because of what I do as well, there's a lot of structure to my collecting, and there's a lot of structure to my asset management generally. So on a quarterly basis, I have my investment officer review all the assets in the portfolio, art, equities, bonds, and I found out that art is about 20% of the total asset, which is a lot, right? So I have to take it seriously because it's value, right? But more than monetary value is that there's also a lot of sentimental value. There's a picture of my grandfather that I grew up with that my mom didn't like. Is my paternal grandfather, and my mom chucked it somewhere. I don't know where she did. But I'm looking for the picture today, not because it has any monetary worth, but for me, it's so sentimentally valuable because I want to be able to show my son that picture. So there are many reasons why it's important to document and structure our investments as though it's an asset class, whether it's for monetary value but also sentimental value. So you can record what the art is about, you can record its location, and more importantly, art collecting is a very, very consuming thing. You have to take care of the works. The condition matters. Like I think you said earlier, paper works in Nigeria can be quite difficult. It's a very humid society.
You have to insure as well.
Yeah?
You have to insure as well.
You have to insure. So there's so many things that happen. It's a great passion, but it's also quite engrossing and tasking a thing to do. But it's something that is so enjoyable that it's one of the biggest and happiest things that I do in life.
Did I add anything?
Sorry?
I said, Joanny, has he not said it all? Yeah, I mean, take it.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just.
we can just answer.
What do you, when you're, and I know you do advise both individuals and corporates about building collections. So, do they talk about, or do you talk to them about what next? When you now have over 100 pieces, over 50 pieces. Have you thought about creating a structure as a legacy for the next generation, or giving instructions, or giving some advice to the next generation, involving them, such that the why, your why, is known to them, and whether they care or not, they've got to listen. I mean, how do you do that sort of work?
The answer is yes. I mean, I don't know if anyone yet has taken the advice, but we've present company excluded, but I do. Help with policy, even just educating the staff at the company, because you have to understand and be educated about this thing first of all. I think we need to begin there before we start talking about what next, but even just what is going on now. I've been privy to stories of pieces of Ella Natsui being thrown away by accident. I've been to offices where an 80,000 pound sculpture was on the floor, like near the dustbin. I think it starts with educating. I think my sort of advocacy first with the corporate world is educating, and I think that's the first step, and then it hopefully leads into some kind of fire that catches on, and they start to invest in what next. With individuals, not everybody can build a museum, but you can, as Jess said, you can support a foundation. Not everyone can build a museum, not everyone can build a foundation, but you can support the institutions. I also very passionate, and we didn't mention this at all, about just making the books, publications. What is written about is real. The Gen Zs will say that if it didn't happen on the gram, it didn't happen. In the art world, if it wasn't written about, it didn't happen. And so another advocacy is going towards funding and making sure that the books that we're writing about what is going on are there. Because then when you can refer to literature about something that happened, it makes it all the more real. I think that's all.
Thank you. We're going to take the question.
Sorry, just a quick one. We have a car blocking other people. It's a black Lexus, and the number is LND 460EX. A black Lexus LND 460EX. So kindly make the effort to move your vehicle. LND 460EX, a black Lexus.
Thank you. So also, just talking about estate planning very quickly. If you own art, 1 piece, 2, 10, and they're part of the things you think about when you're making your will or setting up a trust or a foundation. They are assets that you can transfer into the structure with instructions to the foundation council or trustees about what you owe in your will. I want this art to go to my grandchild or be sold or not sold. So again, it's an asset class that needs to be treated as, with the same amount of attention as your real estate or your investment portfolio. So let's look at the questions on here. Jess, can you answer the one about I can buy art from a good artist at Lekki Market cheaper than museums? Why is that? Were there Slido questions? Sorry. Do you want to take the Slido, or should we go straight here?
It's not by vote. This was sent in, but it's via Slido as well. So we can take this ones for first.
Okay. Yes.
First, a little clarification. Museums do not sell artworks. I guess the person who wrote it meant a gallery. So yes, it's possible. You can find some interesting things. Some people tend to distinguish or to put a barrier between craft and art. And you say, Lekki Market, crafts. Galleries, art. I know plenty of galleries that are objects that are mere craft.
Wow.
Exactly. They have very little to contribute as artworks. Very little. It's just somebody who is repeating and doing well. Sometimes you may go to Lekki Market or any other place where, in principle, they are selling just crafts and see something that has been done delicately, with a clear intention, with ability, with skill, that is beautiful. Well, perhaps I would rather buy, or perhaps not, surely I would rather buy that one, and it can be most likely cheaper than in the gallery.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, you can add.
So I think, the art collecting game is very complicated. Sorry, it's very complicated. It seems easy. It seems you can go to Lekki Art Market, or you can even buy art in traffic, and you will be good. The truth, or the hard truth, is that if you want your collection to have any value, it's unlikely that will lead you to the path of value. I think Oliver Barker, who's like one of the guys at Sotheby's, was talking about Paul Allen's collection. Paul Allen is one of the founders of Microsoft. And when he started collecting, Oliver Barker said he went straight to the top. He made very little mistakes. So I started thinking, what does it mean that he made mistakes, or he made little mistakes? It's very easy to make mistakes in anything that you deploy money to do. You can buy the wrong real estate, you can buy the wrong bonds, you can buy the wrong equities. In the same way, you can buy the wrong art. That's what it is.
Okay, in interest of time, Ugoma, what do you want to say about when you say African art, is the definition based on the style and content of art, or is it based on nationality of the artist?
My opinion is that I actually don't like it when people say African art. It actually is my pet peeve. I say art from Africa. And even that doesn't have a look, because I have Kenyan, Rwandese, Nigerian, Ghanaian art in my collection. You can't connect them. There's no look. So I think it's just sort of like the lingo that we've sort of started to use. It's art from Africa. There's no style. There's no one style. For contemporary, I would say definitely there's no one style that sells you as African. In fact, the more successful contemporary art looks global, and true beautiful art transcends, region, ethnicity, feeling, because we're one big human race, but there's art that we index that is from Africa.
I can add to that. I think often we're really referring to the origin of the artist, but it doesn't mean that the art is African art, because the artist may be someone of Nigerian descent who has spent all their lives in Frankfurt or in Berlin or in the US, and so sometimes their art will actually reflect their experience, the narrative that they're trying to portray. So yes, I think it's a bit of just lingo, and yes, can be misleading, because I will tell you that a lot of non-African, like European collectors, see contemporary African art or contemporary art by an African artist, and they ask me and say, is it really African art? Because they don't see masks, they don't see baskets and clay pots and market scenes. And so again,
don't knock the market scene.
Exactly. So again, I say to them, well, it's art by an artist of African origin, and that's what he is portraying, whatever what his experience is. This is AI. So with who wants to talk about the disruption caused by AI? Do you see collectors having collections of AI-generated art, and do you see it becoming an asset class that can be valued? I will tell you personally, I do not feel there is enough industry and thought that art tends to depict or emotion in the AI space. But yes, there is artists who work with AI, and the problem also is that there are now artists who will feed into their chat GPT. I want painting with color palettes that's like a sunset. I want it to be a bit of Monet. I want it to be a bit of a Nkontchou. I want a woman and a man, and I want a nude. And you'd be surprised that AI does paint that painting. Is that art?
It depends.
Yeah, because he talks about different forms of art. It can be for sentimental reasons. It can be for aesthetic.
So it's personal. Like I said to you, some collectors love it. I mean, maybe the Gen Zs will say that and say it's art. But sometimes we find current artists also being at a disadvantage because you can copy their style very quickly with AI. So there isn't enough originality sometimes. But I think it's very personal. NFTs came and went. People thought they were going to make big money from NFTs and blockchain. That was always questionable, and I didn't dabble. I don't know if anybody else did, but that end of that hasn't gone anywhere, for example. Yes.
I think there is room for AI. I'm quite positive. The same way that some centuries ago, before they started doing stained glass, who would think that a piece of glass will be art? And then it came. Before there was easel painting, mixing oil with a pigment, and what they have were frescoes on walls. Who would have thought that this could be art? When photography came, with cinema came, AI can be a tool if there is an artist behind.
If there's an artist behind.
If there is an artist. A good artist using AI can produce a great artwork. Now, AI alone, in my opinion, cannot produce a great artwork.
Exactly. So that
answers the last question, yes, which was, can you fuse?
That was the last question. Can you fuse?
Can you advise artists to fuse AI into their work?
Some artists are doing that. Some artists are using AI,
and they can still be original.
Yes, and yeah, because it's their thought and it's their the actual process.
But still, I have been looking at AI generated art for some time now, and I will be ready to launch a bet here. You show me 100 images of 100 artworks made by an artist, and show me 100 images of works generated by AI. If I fail in more than 5 or 10, I will pay something. You are ready. And if I get 95, you pay me something. I don't think I will lose, because clearly, for now, at least there is a difference. There is something there.
Well, thank you. I think time is really up.
Yes, your time is up. Yes.
So thank you very much to my panelists. Thank you. I hope it made it interesting.